perhaps start off by asking you to rewind back to not Sun Microsystems, but you had two companies before that. Is that correct?
I had yes, two companies before Sun.
Okay, so maybe talk us through. I mean, at SPC, we're all essentially, in varying degrees of the -1 kind of, like, I would say, journey, trying to figure out which ideas are worth tackling, trying to gain conviction in an idea. So I'm curious, like, back when you were starting off and you were kind of like trying to figure out what to dedicate your time to, how did you go through that process?
My first startup was called Daisy Systems. It was a CAD company. Actually started the whole field of CAD practically. Before that, there was graphics that was meant to be CAD, but if two lines crossed, it didn't mean there was a circuit connection. There was no database under the graphics. So it was a direct paper translation. That was quite successful, went public. I did that right out of business school, and that worked pretty well. But one of the things I realized is you have to have the right teams with, more importantly, the right values. And I didn't share values with either especially the investors. Fred Adler was our investor. I don't mind naming names. But being values aligned is really, really important. So I left and then started looking at two different ideas, both with Scott McNeely. One was a temporary sort of, it'd be fun to do this kind of idea. And we sort of did that in a very bad way. That failed. But we really also focused on what was the core technology idea. And I found Andy Bechtolsheim, and I decided I wanted to work with Andy. By the way, one of the really important lessons, Andy was developing the Sun workstation at Stanford. Sun used to stand for Stanford University Network. So that's where the name came from. And he was licensing his design because he was a graduate student for $10,000 a pop. I said, and this is a really important lesson. He had licensed it to 6 other people, which in those days, $60,000 for a grad student was a shitload of money.
I think it still is a shitload of money, even with inflation.
Yeah, but think of inflation adjusted from $1980. But I said, no, Andy, I want the goose that laid the golden egg. I don't want the golden egg. And in the end, he became a co-founder, which took me a lot of time because I had to convince him to drop his PhD. Then we went over to Berkeley and convinced Bill Joy to drop his PhD. I was good at selling, and you do a lot of selling. But the team you build ends up being the company you build. When most people said, well, you can license the technology and you'll be fine. In fact, none of the other players, and there were 6 others, including Jim Clark at Netscape, who had done silicon graphics, licensed the same technology, but never came to much. Because one principal lesson I've learned across the years, the team you build initially is the company you build.